how to tell your axle gear ratio. In this video, I'm going to show you two methods and talk about other ways you can figure that out. In this case, I'm going to be using a Jeep Wrangler with a solid axle and an open differential, and I'll talk to you about why that's important here in 1 second. Essentially, if you spin one side tire or the axle shaft itself, the other side's going to spin at the same exact direction. If they are an open diff, you're going to spin this side and the other side's going to spin in the opposite direction. Before I get into the ways that are more hands-on for figuring out your gear ratio, I'm going to show you two other ways that make this job real easy. Number one is going to be simply just calling the dealership. If you have a Jeep Wrangler, give them the VIN number and they can tell you the axle gear ratio. That's going to assume the axles have not been re-geared, that they're OEM stock ratio. Now the other way, I'm fortunate enough today, I'm swapping out the OEM axles that were in this Jeep and we are upgrading to a Dana 44. So I'm going to be able to show you a way that'll work if you have your diff covers pulled. Say you're at the junkyard, you're pulling covers to make sure those teeth are good inside that gear set anyway. I'm going to show you another way to do this real simply. I'll go take the camera over here and show you how that's done. Okay, so on the ring gear, you're going to have a series of numbers, and a lot of these won't mean anything to you, but there will be a set that looks like this. This one being 488, so there's three numbers, and this one's followed by R, which probably stands for reverse cut in this case. So this set of gears is an aftermarket set. A lot of the aftermarket sets will just tell you the gear ratio right on them. With the OEM sets, you're going to see four numbers here. And what you're going to do is you actually take the first number, which is usually larger, and you're going to divide that by that second number. Here's an example of that right here I have written down. So a lot of times you will see a 373 gear, so you're going to have a 4111 stamp. Usually there's a space between the two. 41 divided by 11 gives you 3.73. Another example might be 3712, giving you a 308 ratio. All right, let's get into how to do this without opening up your actual diff cover or having to deal with talking to anybody on the phone. I don't know about you, but if I can handle things on my own, I'd rather just do it on my own rather than having to call a dealership and have to deal with that world. I'm going to show you two methods here. I personally feel like the first method is a little bit harder because it has room for error. And the second way I'm going to show you takes a little bit more work, but it's going to be a lot more accurate of a reading. So one big advantage to doing these two methods is you can do this with tires on, you can do it with the drive shaft hooked up. Now, of course, your vehicle's transmission is going to need to be either in neutral or you can put the transfer case in neutral. That's what I've done in this case. You're going to need to, in an open differential situation, again, block up either that tire, or in my case, I'm stopping this axle shaft from turning by wedging into the caliper and between the rotor. You barely even need any tools. You're just going to need a couple ways to basically mark your location on both the differential and your either tire or rotor and caliper. That can be done with a piece of tape. You can do that with paint marker, or in my case, I like the chalk. We live in the Rust Belt, so tape has a hard time sticking. The paint marker obviously is permanent, but also sometimes has a hard time transferring. And I found the chalk to be nice, bright white. It's easy to see. If I'm doing this style, I take like a wrench to put on here so I can get a nice, consistent turn here of the rotor. So let me show you style one, which is the quickest. This is what Eric, the car guy, showed, but I don't think it's quite as accurate. Maybe there's room for error would be the better way to put this. And let me show you why that is here. So as you can see, that differential is marked. I have the diff mark and then also the drive shaft, making a line between the two. And here, these two move separately. So my backer plate and my rotor move separately. And all you're going to do in this case, turn the rotor one full turn, so it'll be marked all the way around till that mark's there again. And as it does that, you're going to count how many rotations that drive shaft makes versus that differential. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this rotor and you guys can watch the differential spin. So we're coming around to 1, and this is not a full turn yet, and we are at our full turn now here. Those are lined up. Essentially I have roughly 1 and 8.75 turns. You're going to take your 1.875, you're going to times that by 2. Now that's going to be a 3.75. So you're timesing it by 2 because it's an open differential. If this is a locked axle, the math is just going to be different. Actually, there is no math. You just count the rotations. You're going to count 1 rotation at the rotor and how many rotations at the drive shafts it turns. If this was a locked differential, that would have turned 3.75 rotations versus 1.875. Now, some of these gear ratios in these axles are very close, so I'm going to show you another method. It's a tiny bit more work, but it's going to be more of an accurate reading. Method number 2 is going to pretty much be the same thing, same exact motion, but the difference being we are going to actually turn this rotor 10 times. Now, you're going to be counting the rotations at the drive shaft. This can kind of, as you're turning and trying to wrestle this thing around, this is where I will usually set up my cell phone here, and I'll actually record that drive shaft turning. So that way I can go back and watch it recording and not have to do this numerous times. So what I've found a lot of times is I start turning this, and I'm trying to count my rotations here, but also count my rotations there, and it gets pretty confusing. Maybe you're smarter than me, and you can pull this off without doing this. All right, let me show you how this is done. We're going to speed this up to make this quick for you. All right, I tried to set this camera up so you can see the rotations at the drive shaft and also the rotations here at the rotor. So again, we're going to turn this rotor 10 times, and you guys can go ahead and count the number of rotations at that drive shaft. And I am going to say out loud the number of rotations at the rotor. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Are you guys finding it hard to count the number of rotations on that drive shaft as I'm counting out loud here? 8. And there is number 10. Now you can see you do not see that mark on that drive shaft. So I'm going to take you underneath here and I will show you. You can actually see that mark right over here. We're going to call that 0.75 or 3/4, however you want to word it. And I counted 18 rotations of that drive shaft. So 18.75. We're going to do that same math where we are going to do 18.75 times 2, giving us 37.5. Now you're going to move your decimal over 1 because it rotated 10 times, giving you 37.5. Now I know they don't make a 3.75 ratio in this, but they do make a 373. So we know that this axle is a 373 gear. Now when I get ready to sell these axles, these used ones, I know exactly what to tell people they truly are so they can get the proper axle underneath their vehicle. All right, hopefully you found this video helpful. Follow along if you like off-road adventure content and Jeep building content.